Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of A Game in a Chair brought to you by the American Civil War Gaming Club. My name is Blake, I'm the host here on this show. And this is a big episode because it is the official end of season number 1. I began this series about 6 months ago and I've had a ton of fun doing it. But I'm going to be taking a little hiatus here just to recharge my batteries and just do a little something different during the summer. There will be a second season of A Game in a Chair, and that will start in the fall. But you're probably wondering, what am I going to do to get me through the summer? I've got to have something to watch. What are you going to give me? Well, I've got something in store for everyone this summer, and I hope you like it. Starting next week, I am going to be presenting a brand new series of videos for everybody. It is Man versus Artificial Intelligence. That's right. I am going to be taking on the computer AI in these Civil War games, and I'm going to test whether or not the AI poses any real challenge to a human player. When I played against the AI 20 years ago, I was able to defeat them with great ease. So unless they've learned a lot of new tricks since then, I really don't anticipate it being much of a challenge. But I'm going to give them their chance, and I'm going to take them on. So this summer, that is going to be the series that I'm going to present to you, a number of different parts entitled Man vs. Artificial Intelligence. I will be taking on the AI in numerous different battlefields, and you guys are going to be able to watch as I battle it out with them. All of that starts next week. But to wrap up Season 1, I wanted to do something special and something a little bit different and have some fun. So I'm going to give you guys my own personal WDS Civil War wish list. These are just some random ideas of mine that I've always had in the back of my head, and I wanted to share them here with you in this final video of Season 1. Will any of these ideas of mine ever go anywhere with WDS? Very highly unlikely. But hey, let's talk about them anyways. So the first thing I wanted to put on my wish list for WDS is multiplayer changes. I would love to see them change the way that they approach multiplayer games within the WDS games. Let me give you an example specifically of what I'm talking about. Here we have the setup from the Battle of Gettysburg. Of course, this is the classic fishhook area around Little Round Top on the morning of July 2nd. Now, if you were playing a normal game, you would see this pop-up screen. Now, usually we click on manual, but what if for commander control, instead of it necessarily being to control the AI aspect of the game where you only control one unit, what if there was something else there like multiplayer control? And then you would get a pop-up screen and you would select specifically the division or divisions or corps that you specifically command in the multiplayer game. And it would link up through maybe a password or some other way to the other members of your multiplayer team. In this example here, I've only chosen Gary's 2nd Division of the Federal 12th Corps, and he is highlighted there on the map. What if you could do all multiplayer games like this, where you could only command the units that you chose at the very start of the game through the commander control, or rather the multiplayer control option? And also, let's take it a step further. What if you could only see the enemy in hexes where you currently have a line of sight from one of the units that you specifically control? How different would that be? What if you could only move those men in the battle as well? So I know a lot of the time in multiplayer games, players will trade forces or they'll split commands up between them based on what's going on in the battlefield. Well, historically, that was very uncommon. Commanders stuck to the commands that they were given. So I think it would be interesting and fun if you were regulated to only moving the forces that you command based on the initial choices of the multiplayer control that you made at the game's start. But going back to the enemy and the line of sight ideas that I had, in this particular instance, you can see that this division has nothing within their field of vision. As far as they are concerned, the battlefield is empty. And if you commanded this division as Gary, this would be what you see. Now, the reality is that to the north, the situation is very different. And if this was a multiplayer game and you did not command these troops, you would not realize that there were Confederates up on this side of the map. And maybe it would be cool if the only person that could see everything on the map for all the different commanders on their side was the person who was chosen as the army commander in the multiplayer control box. I think that would be really interesting. Now, of course, that person could just take screenshots and send them to their team, but that would kind of defeat the purpose. So this would require some house rules and some multiplayer rules where the players have to play within the spirit of the thing and not tell each other what they can see and what's going on unless it's allowed by the house rules that they are using. This would just be a fun twist to the multiplayer experience. Because again, if you go back to Gary's division, all they can see is what's on the screen there in front of them. So if part of their army is being heavily attacked and they have no orders to go to their aid, or if they simply can't see what's going on, that changes the dynamics of a multiplayer game considerably. Alright, back to my general wish list. Again, I'm going to come back to line of sight changes because I think there's a lot of areas of opportunity for WDS in this category. Let's give an example of something that we've all seen and probably all hate. This is a screenshot from the Battle of Chattanooga. Let's just say in this hypothetical situation that this Confederate unit there has hidden in the trees and has just laid low for the last few hours of gameplay. And then all of a sudden, this unit, which is completely detached from the rest of the army, pops up on a hill, gets a full view of the enemy's army, and then immediately relays that information back to the rest of the Confederate army. Obviously, we've all seen instances like this, and they really do drive me nuts, and I'm sure they drive everybody else nuts as well. This was before the era of electronic communication, so there's no way that this detached unit could send the word back to the other Confederate forces instantaneously like they do. So what I propose and what I'd like to see is that any units which are detached have a line of sight of only 5 hexes. That would be very interesting. It would encourage players to keep their units together more, because if that unit isn't detached, well then they can send the information back to the rest of the army through the technical chain of command that goes on behind the scenes. And that would just put a stop to this instantaneous communication factor, which can just make these games really frustrating at times. There's nothing worse than really working hard to keep the fog of war around your army just to have one lone enemy unit pop out of nowhere and instantly broadcast all your positions to the enemy army. It's completely unrealistic and something that I think could be reeled in by creating a 5 hex visibility limit for any detached units. Alright, the next thing on my WDS Civil War wish list is a little bit controversial, but I'm going to state it nonetheless. I believe that movement should equal fatigue in the game. Now, I know this is going to be probably pretty unsettling for some people, but I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that movement should equal fatigue in some way. Let me give you an example here. This is the battlefield map for the Battle of Gettysburg. Now let's say you enter this map from the southern edge, and you begin a long march all the way to the town of Gettysburg. That is quite a good distance. Let's say you're the 105th Pennsylvania. Guess what you've just done? You've made a 15-mile march. I hope you brought some water because you're going to be gassed at the end of that march. But in our games, you can make that entire march and have 0 fatigue. That seems ridiculous. Our units never tire from marching. And it doesn't matter if they are Jackson's foot cavalry or if they're 90-day volunteers. They can still march at the same rate. Now, I get having different movement values is probably off the table as being too complicated. But you could make fatigue different for each unit based on their quality. And I think it would be interesting to have units gain fatigue each turn they expend more than half their movement points. So if you have 12 movement points and you go more than 6, you take a fatigue penalty. And that fatigue penalty would be based on the quality of the unit. So high quality units will suffer smaller fatigue penalties when they move across the board, whereas inexperienced units which aren't used to all the marching, they would suffer higher penalties while moving across the board. And I think this would add a very fun element to the game and force the commanders to perhaps slow down for a turn or two or move slower with inexperienced troops. Because really, a hardened veteran unit will be able to make a 15-mile march much easier than a 90-day volunteer unit which has never been on a battlefield before. When they reach their destination, I would imagine the veterans are still going to have their rifles and they're going to be prepared to go into combat. Whereas the green unit, they're going to be laying on the ground, gasping for air, or perhaps just laying there with sunstroke. You don't know. But there should be some element in these games to reflect that. Alright, the next thing on my list is I wish there were higher modifiers for leaders. Now this is going to require some explaining, but it's pretty simple what I'm talking about here. Let me give you an example. The 11th Alabama. They get a plus 10% modifier if there is any leader in the same hex with them during a melee. Now that means if it is a random leader from a completely different brigade, they still get 10%. If it is their brigade commander, it's 10%. If it's their division, corps, or army commander, it's still 10%. So apparently, anybody on a horse makes these guys fight harder, which seems kind of silly. So how much more fun would it be if the modifier was based on the leader's actual position in the army's hierarchy? So let's run this example again. And now, instead of it being 10% for just any leader in the same hex, the modifier would be determined by the level of the leader in the melee. So, under this idea, any leader on the board, if they are not associated with the brigade itself, would still give them a 5% modifier. Their brigade commander, though, would give them a 10% modifier. And this is where things get a little bit more interesting. If it is their division commander, they would get a 20% modifier in a melee. If it was their corps commander, it would be 30%. And if the army commander is involved in the melee, they would get a 40% modifier. Now, that could be a lot of fun because players could then weigh the risks of leader losses against the real benefits of having them in the front lines for high leverage situations. If your army is on the brink of disaster, maybe you do send in your corps commander or your army commander to try one last desperate melee to reverse the tide of battle. Maybe your army commander comes out of it just fine and does not get shot and killed or wounded or captured. On the other hand, maybe he does. And that should change everything in that situation. Now, it'd be more likely that a division commander would probably factor into this, but again, if you know anything about command and control, it's never a smart idea to risk anything above a brigade level when it comes to battlefield losses. Therefore, you're really going to have to think about when and if you want to use these high command leaders in actual melee situations. It just adds an element of fun to the game. Alright, I have one more thing on my WDS wish list, and that is I wish they would bring back where you can see the original strength of a unit. This is a small thing, and I include it on this list just because it's a personal thing to me. One of the things I did like about the old Talon Soft or Matrix games was that you would get these pop-ups with the units which would show what their current strength was in yellow. And then when you right-clicked on the unit, it would show you their full strength along with their order of battle. So you can very quickly see that this unit began with 350 men and now has 275. It's really kind of simple. Of course, in the current games, they give you strength percentage, which, I guess it kind of does the same thing if you really enjoy math, which I don't think anybody really enjoys math. So now when you right-click on this unit, it just shows you their order of battle. Now, if you sat down with a calculator or if you looked up the original order of battle, you could find out how many men this unit originally had. Off the top of my head, just looking at this, I have absolutely no idea what their original strength was. So with my idea, what should ideally happen is that moving forward, they should just have the normal information area there. But then when you right-click on the unit, it will show you the order of battle along with their original strength. So this unit actually started with 410 men. Is this a big deal? Absolutely not. You'd think it'd be something that they could just fix, if it even needs to be fixed, relatively simply. It just kind of makes it convenient for you, the player, to see really quickly how many men a unit has lost, not as a percentage, which I guess helps you in some way, but as an actual number of, in this case, 70 as opposed to 18%. Alright, so those are all parts of my WDS Civil War wish list. I avoided saying I wished for a new game or I wished for a map editor because those would have been the obvious things, so I tried to keep it limited to just these fun gameplay things which I think if added to the WDS system or at least talked about could really change the way we play these games and also just add some more fun to them. Alright everybody, thank you for watching, I do appreciate it. This is the end of Season 1 of A Game in a Chair, but I will be back in the fall with a brand new season. And I will tell you right now, there are some very exciting ideas and episodes coming in Season 2. I've had time to think about how I want to do things differently moving forward, and I've hit upon a few good ideas, which I hope everyone will enjoy and really get into. Now, during the summer, don't forget, I will be bringing you a brand new series of videos called Man vs. Artificial Intelligence. If you're one of those people that enjoys playing the AI, or if you're perhaps just wondering, is the AI comparable to a human player? Well, I'm going to test them out, and I'm going to give you my opinion on all of that throughout the summer months. Now for this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button on there. That does help our algorithm and gets us recommended to other Civil War gamers. Also, subscribe. When you do that, you will get notified when future videos drop on the American Civil War Gaming Club channel. Again, this has been a lot of fun to produce, and I'm really excited to be bringing everybody more content throughout the summer and into the fall. I think there's just so many of us that enjoy these WDS games that we crave more content and someone to talk to or listen to or interact with these games. They are that much fun that you can hardly ever get enough of them. Alright, until next time everybody, just remember, keep gaming.